All right, what's up, y'all? Will here with Schedule Fly, and we have another episode of the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast today. It has been a little while. I'm very excited to get back dialed into recording episodes with a guy I've known quite some time and have quite a bit of respect for, Brandon Sharp, who actually listened to this podcast, I think, before he ever came on. He's been on it a couple times, and this is a great opportunity to talk about a podcast that he is doing now. So, very briefly, as y'all know, this podcast is sponsored by us here at Schedulefly. Super simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service, all at a low price point. We haven't changed our prices since 2007. So if you're on pencil and paper or you're on Excel, we can make life a lot easier for you and your team, give your employees their schedule and everything they need to know on an app on their phone, wherever they are. If you are on another scheduling software, you may have seen those prices go up, up, up the last few years as those companies need to please their venture capital investors and their private equity investors. And here we are, this small team, bootstrapped and no price increases. So give us a shot. We'd love to earn your business. My cell phone is on the website. There's a free trial, and we are at schedulefly.com. All right, now, Brandon Sharp, thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time today. We needed to reconnect anyway, but what really prompted this is on Instagram, I saw that you have started something called the Industry Standard, and you've got a Substack. You're writing articles. You're putting out content. So tell us all about that, man. What prompted that?
So it was prompted, the industry standard, the whole concept of it was prompted by a conversation I was having with a colleague, a guy my age, and we're talking about the sunny slopes of long ago and just bemoaning, like, all middle-aged men, I'm sure, of any industry do, the all the things that are going to be lost when we're no longer in the game. So I started to interview some of those colleagues and start to write some things down. And even in an age when you can, have Marco Pierre White teach you to make palm fondant on YouTube, there's so many things that I'm afraid that will be lost if we don't catalog them and make them available to help the next generation of chefs somehow. And there's a million recipes and a million cooking podcasts and recipe videos and things like that out there. And, that's not what the industry standard is about. It's more about the tactics and strategies of everything from, how to make your boss look good to how to open your first restaurant, how to not only read, but interpret and generate, financial statements and basically all the stuff that I was too afraid to ask when I got to a point in my career when I probably should have already known all this stuff and then ended up having to learn it the hard way. So that's the mission, is to pass that stuff on.
And that's sort of the non-sexy part of this business that is the majority of this business and the reality of this business, that people that are getting into the business uh, may not want to deal with, may not know how to deal with, and is not probably promoted enough. Because as cool as it seems to be I mean, you've got your three restaurants in and around Chapel Hill, these awesome places. We're looking at Bluebird right there, cool place, seems amazing, seems like a real sexy thing to do, owning and running restaurants. And that is a portion of that, but there's also a huge portion of that that's roll up the sleeves, hard work, learning so many different. Uh, I mean, every aspect of the economy flows through a restaurant, and there's so many things you have to master to get it right. And it's unfortunately, some people, and I think you're probably going to help prevent this. Some people learn the hard way, which is they get into it and because they can bake really well or something, or they're a good cook, and then they realize that it ain't about just that. It's about all kinds of other aspects that are really tough, and it's a thin margin business, and it's lots of late nights and lots of, hey, the cook quit, or the freezer went out at 3 a.m., and it all falls on the restaurant owner at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there, you said it really well. And there are a couple things that have become, as I've thought more and more about this venture, and what are the most important things to pass on. A couple of the most important things are, one, if you get where you want to go in this career, where most of the cooks who work for me and then I've worked side by side want to go, cooking becomes the easy part. Like that becomes second nature, that becomes the fun part, that becomes a creative expression, that has instant gratification, that always makes people smile, and you use all five senses. And that's wonderful. But it's when lenders, vendors, cities, counties, and states want money from you. It's when, yeah, when the freezer goes out, or when somebody doesn't come in and you're out of town on a Saturday. It's all that stuff that is the very non-glamorous and non-televised part of the business. Um, yeah, and then the other thing is, man, I wish I should have written this down while you were talking.
Well, let me ask you this. You did like I was looking through, I mean, you have stuff like what was the one that was like, what's the biggest lie you've ever told at work? Or
Yeah.
something like that. So tell just I know you've got sort of like lessons in there, philosophical lessons, and then like tactical specific things that you really want to focus on. I feel like, and I mean, I do this a lot of times. I don't even know the right question to ask because I haven't ever run a restaurant. So I don't know how to ask to take the question to the next level of some of the details of like things like accounting. Like I mean, I
Mhm.
can't stand accounting. I'm not a numbers guy. I don't like financial parts. Man, like that stuff is a huge deal. And frankly, it just seems to me that it's getting even harder these days to get a restaurant, every aspect of the restaurant figured out. I mean, your prices have gone up and everything you buy, labor goes up. There's just, it seems like it's got to be harder than ever to, in a low margin business to create margins. But a lot of that's just understanding your food cost and doing inventory and things like that, I'm assuming that that's the kind of stuff that you're going to drill down into.
Very much so. And I've got one, it's the longest article that I've written so far that basically goes line by line on the expense portion of a P&L sheet to frame out exactly what each of those costs is and what it really should be, if you want your margin to be X. There's a useful thought exercise that I do with the managers at these restaurants. And I say, okay, Red Snapper is let's say Red Snapper is going to be the special on Friday night, and we're going to buy, let's pick some nice round numbers. We're going to buy 20 portions of it, and that's going to cost us $200. Well, if we want our profit margin to be 10%, then how many of those, then we need to, we'll break even on 18 of them, and then we have to sell those last two to make any money at all. So if we cook one for the staff and and the saute cook burns one, has to throw it away, then the best we can do is break even. And then another way to put it is, let's say there's 30 days in this month and we want our profit margin to be 10%. We need to cover all of our costs on the first 27 days. And then those last 3 days of revenue, if we've done everything else correctly, will be that 10% margin. But if the power goes out, if a tree falls on the power lines, or if it snows and ices and we have to close for 2 days, what's the best we can do, profit wise this month? Well, 3.5%. So, framing it like that for not only the managers but the line staff is a really helpful model to get them to start thinking like owners and to taking a little bit of the piece of ownership. And then another thing when it comes to making your first dollar, there's like a series of light bulbs that have to go off. You say, well, okay, I know what I can do. I have something that people are going to want to buy. I know what I can sell them. Okay, well, here's a credit card. Oh, well, okay, I guess I need a payment processor. Okay, for that, I need a bank account. Okay, for that, I need an LLC. So, all these little things that have to be done in a certain order so as not to lose a ton of time and money. Are all things that I want to talk about because they're all things that cooks have asked me along the way, and they've usually approached me as if it's some sort of secret insider knowledge, which I remember thinking of it that way as well. But I don't want it to be. I want it to be transparent, and if I really want the cooks and chefs of the next generation to stand on my shoulders, I think that's a responsibility that I have to, explain this as simply and clearly and in as much, granular detail as as anyone can possibly bear. So yeah, that's the thinking.
So you have you have cooks that come to you that work for you, or cooks or chefs that come to you that know of you, or both? I mean, I'm assuming that you have people that have grown up under you that have gone on to do their own thing, and you probably support that. You also have a great reputation. You have a very storied track record and career. Um, where like how how much time do you spend um, helping folks learn all this stuff? And I know you're doing that now through your podcast and through the content you're creating. I mean, do you have a lot of, are people still coming to you wanting to do this, Brandon, or are people starting to just say the restaurant business is more challenging than ever? It's not worth it.
No, I don't, people are not throwing up their hands, at least the ones who are coming to me are not doing that. And so the one thing that I was slow to realize, and it's not like it came to me on my own, I heard somebody else say it, was that, the things that are scalable are code and media, and things like that are infinitely producible. And if I'm speaking to someone on Instagram, if I'm speaking to 10 people or 10,000 people, it's still a one-on-one, because people look at social media on an individual basis. So it's still really a one-on-one conversation. So instead of me just being one-to-one, shoulder to shoulder in front of the stove with one cook, I can be one-to-one with many, many, many people. So that's the idea. But yes, they and most of the cooks and chefs that are in our restaurants, they're all so damn busy all the time. It's not, a ton of leisure time that they have to, wander out and find me in the dining room working on my laptop and sit down and ask me about this stuff. It's usually a short conversation, and they have a specific question, and it's, right after the end of another meeting or right before somebody else's review or something like that. And to a person, I wish they all felt more comfortable doing that, because this is the type of knowledge that I am not just willing but truly excited to pass on. And again, goes right back to the genesis for starting this at all.
What is something that you think is a, or is there something that you've seen as sort of like a recurring misperception or mistake that people make when they decide to start their restaurant, and then 6 months later, a year later, you see the lights go out? I mean, I see it. I see there's one right up around the corner from us.
Yeah.
I bet they were there for 6 months, which is hard for me to imagine, that it could go that quickly, but it can if you haven't planned effectively. And maybe, but I'm just curious, like, what are some of the things that you want to help people prevent against?
That's a really good question, because undercapitalization is a huge problem that I see. You know, you think it's going to cost 250,000 to open a restaurant. You should probably spend 600,000 if you want the full experience. Now you can have something that's just a storefront window, and you can have the best roast beef subs in 3 states, and you can make a living, and you can hopefully make a killing doing that. But if you want something that people are going to spend time in, and it feels good, and that the service is great, and that the food is good, it just, one, it takes a lot of money to create that type of experience. So I think undercapitalization, unfortunately, is an issue that I see quite a lot. Um, and then the other one is just a genuine lack of true hospitality. I mean,
Mm.
to me, the restaurant industry is a subset of the hospitality business. And if you don't go into it with the values and with the intent of truly wanting, not just making people feel, but wanting people to feel better when they left with less money than when they walked through the door with more money, I think that the odds are stacked against you. So pride is a useless asset. I think if you think that you're so great and your food is so great and the people should love you, I'm very scared for you. Please, please, please be nice to the people, be welcoming to them. The better your food is, the better your reputation is, the more intimidated they're going to be. So the nicer and sweeter your staff needs to be, not just in person when they walk in the door, but on the phone. The tone of the language on your website. Is it welcoming? Is it genuinely hospitable? I have I grudgingly accepted long ago that if you're going to, draw a pie chart of guest satisfaction in restaurants, food satisfaction is less than 49%. Service is more than half the battle. Great food cannot turn around a terrible service experience, but elite service, excellent service can turn around, a less than stellar dining experience in terms of food.
Boy, okay, so two great things that I want to break down is undercapitalization and hospitality. So let's talk about, you talked about the cost of build out, but how about like working capital? Like you need to come into this with pretty good like X number of months of working capital to know that you because you just got this run rate of getting people there and getting things going and dialing everything in. Um, how much do you typically need to have if you can at your disposal to feel comfortable?
I don't think there's any amount to feel comfortable. I think it would have to be into seven digits, which I've never seen before. But but yeah, I think that 6 months of working capital is a great barometer for that. But that's a huge number.
Yeah,
Let's say if your restaurant is bringing in $200,000 a month and you're at a 10% margin, then that's $180,000 really worth of expenses, really worth of working capital a month. Six times 800,000 is what? $880,000 or I mean, no, a million 80,000. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money. So even if you took a third of that out for labor, um, it's still, that's a
that's
lot, but you need way more than will get you over the finish line to opening day. You need a runway of a cash float in the bank. It's a myth that restaurants can't start making money immediately because they can. But what usually happens is that restaurants open with a lot of them because cash will be running short during construction. So they'll open with minimum viable product, right? What's the least I can do to get the doors open and start reversing this negative cash flow? But then you continue to spend money past opening day. All restaurants do. We always do on, oh, well, we still got to hang these pictures. Oh, we really should have painted this ceiling a different color. Oh, we forgot to buy patio furniture and it's almost April. So, those types of things, there's always a hangover of usually FF&E expenses after opening, and those don't hit the profit and loss statement, but they're real money you got to spend that hits the balance sheet. So that's one thing about capitalization that I would, and it's not easy, right? Because I mean, Bluebird, this space is gorgeous now, but we took it all the way down to the studs. We ran out of money several times. I had to put out a personal loan. Elizabeth and I did to the business, and it just took so much money, and it's just a crushing fact of opening a business. And so, it's rare that you find that turnkey second generation space that fits both your space needs, your menu needs, and all of that. And all you have to do maybe is change the paint on the walls. And of course, there are drawbacks to that, but that's the dream where you have this asymmetric risk, right? Where you're putting only a little bit of money in, and then instantly you're going to get a lot of money out. Most spaces are the opposite.
okay, so let's get into that a little bit more. So, okay, you're trying to figure out how do I get 6 months of working capital? You're opening your first restaurant. You're probably like, what are you doing? You're going out and getting hopefully an SBA loan. Maybe you're raising money from friends and family. What do you typically see from somebody that's maybe they're a veteran, recognized chef. I mean, you came to Chapel Hill and started Hawthorne and Wood. Like, how do you get started with that with raising money? whether it be borrowing or equity or both. Like, what is a good, rule of thumb for people to try to the process they have to go through to pull together the money to actually even get this thing going?
Yeah, good question. And we have basically three models at the three restaurants. So, I have three good different perspectives on that. One, so when we moved back from Napa Valley to Chapel Hill in fall of 2016, and I became the chef at the Carolina Inn for 2 years and spent that time, early mornings and late nights when I wasn't working, thinking about what the competitive set of restaurants was around here. Obviously, we're getting to know the vendors and the labor pool, and then also talking to friends and family about investing in a potential restaurant of ours, and talking to real estate brokers about potential sites. And that was at a time in 2017, 2018, when restaurant space in Chapel Hill was very difficult to find. That obviously changed in 2020 and 2021, but back in 2018, so we're raising this money. We're talking to contractors, and talking to landlords all at the same time. So all three parties, it's a very chicken or the egg thing, because no one wants to sign a lease without, putting without the landlord doesn't want me to sign a lease if I don't have the money in the bank, and the investors don't want to put any money in the bank till I have the money. And there's this X factor of an SBA loan, which is the most complex process. It took, I think, 7 months to get the SBA loan complete. And it was approved by an SBA approved bank underwriter at the 3 month mark. But there was still another 4 months of paperwork and record gathering and contract approval and all this stuff that was absolutely mind numbing, just to get the dollars flowing. And um, a 10%, I believe it was a 10% deposit against the SBA loan. So the SBA loan is wonderful. It's at a floating interest rate, which hasn't been great the last couple of years, but it's a 10-year term. And that's what allowed us to open the restaurant, was the fact that we could get an SBA loan. And it was an excruciating process, but it was the only way that was going to happen. So that's Hawthorne and Wood, and that restaurant is balanced between equity and SBA loan. So for Bluebird, I was able to raise a little bit more money, because some of the guests who loved Hawthorne and Wood so much, were willing to help invest in Bluebird. And then most of the investors had who had been part of Hawthorne and Wood, did well from that restaurant, and so were willing to go into this one. And so, along with their equity, instead of SBA loans, which I couldn't face again, and the bigger the bank, the shorter the list of loan option it has. It has.
Yeah.
So if you go to small banks, they can get pretty creative loans. You go to big banks, they absolutely not to any new restaurant. And because we wanted, we siloed the two companies. It's not one company that owns both, because we wanted them to succeed or fail on their own, and not artificially buoy or drag the other one. Um, we weren't able to. It was viewed by every bank as a completely new venture. So what we did for this restaurant was we took out equipment leases. So basically, the furniture in here, and the heavy kitchen equipment became part of a 5-year lease. And so that was done through, a North State Bank, a Raleigh bank, who specializes in this type of thing, and works with our equipment supplier quite often. So those are 5-year terms on those leases. And so all of that stuff, is what's great about those is that the collateral is not a cash deposit. The collateral is the equipment itself. So that is another great and creative way to be able to outfit a restaurant, is equipment leases. And then for Proximo, we were able to raise enough money to where it's not financed through debt at all. So
Mm.
Proximo is strictly financed through investor equity. So that is the simplest and the cleanest way to do it. But you need individuals who realize that they are investing in a restaurant, and there is a good chance that they will lose everything. So
Yeah, right. Okay, so right, you have less options when you're starting, and you're probably going to have to take on debt. SBA loans, for those listening, small business administration loans, one thing about those is that there's a lot of banks that do them, but not all banks do them the same. And so you want to even shop those around. There's the banks, some banks like them a lot because they're taking on like I think it's like 25% of the risk or whatever. But with an SBA loan, you're doing a personal guarantee in those
Yeah.
situations as well. So you're putting a lot on the line, but and they do have a floating rate. So back in 2016, those rates were pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
They're a little
This year
bit
they
more.
spiked a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
rates
they're
are
a
great
little
this
more
year.
challenging now. Okay, then talk about but so if you're doing that, shop those around, talk to a lot of different bankers at a lot of different banks. They are a long, grueling process, but probably necessary a lot of times if you're getting your first place started. And then the equity investors, how do you is it equity or is it a loan, a person like how do you pay back investors in a restaurant?
No, it's true equity, and so they get paid back through distributions. So, a portion of, once you start to realize profit, if you realize profit, that goes back to them. And I'm sure there are 1,000 ways to structure those distributions, but normally it's just a pro rata share of what they invested.
Okay, got it. Got it. And what would be a typical payback of principal on an investment in a restaurant from an equity investor? Is it like a 5 or 10 year or 3 year payback of
Well,
their
it varies. Yeah, no, it varies. And so for Hawthorne and Wood was doing quite well, but it took me forever to pay them back because of that PPP money. Basically, my accountant said, okay, yes, you have enough money to start paying them back, but until all of this is forgiven, you need to just hold on to that money and just be careful. So there's no, I mean, so I guess in pitching the business plan, the operating budget, and the 5-year pro forma to the investors, I had to show them something for all three restaurants in terms of what I thought the distribution schedule and the payback timeline would be. And usually it was less than 5 years. And so, from my understanding of working at Solage at a big hotel where the owners were real estate investors, their expected return was 7 years. But then, their capitalization cost for that resort was $70 million. So, different scale of what we're talking about. So, and again, back to the example of a second generation restaurant space that is almost turnkey, the expected return on that should be over a very, very short timeline.
what's a typical range of the portion of equity that investors would take in a restaurant, or does that vary greatly?
Yeah, no, it varies. And so, for instance, when I talked to a potential investor of the restaurant that we opened out in California, and he was saying, "Yeah, I've invested in a ton of restaurants, never seen a dime in return." And he told me about a place that he had invested off of Union Square in San Francisco, and it was a Wolfgang Puck concept, and he said that. And so at a certain level of celebrity chef status, he said, his money was the last money in and the first money out, and the rest of us never saw a dime. And so I certainly don't do it that way. And so we make it, much more equitable. But what I guess the advantage that I've set up for my investors that I think a lot of chefs and restaurateurs don't do is that they keep a pro rata share of the business here in perpetuity. So it shrinks over time, but there are only three tiers to but it only shrinks to a forever amount after they've been paid back to 110% of their original investment. And so then they continue to get distributions, for the life of the restaurant. They never get bought out completely. And I think that was attractive to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Um, okay. So you can get seems like I mean, you can get really creative with how you structure these deals in a restaurant,
Mhm.
even if you have, let's talk about that. So when you have an SBA loan, does that, are there any restrictions above and beyond that on how much equity you can sell or things like that? Is it more challenging to structure it with that debt, or do they care?
No, that didn't. I think that I had already had all of the investors on board when that happened. They just wanted to see that, we already had, a certain amount in the bank, and I think our SBA loan was for 440,000 or something like that. And so I can't remember if we had to put 10 or 20% down, as a deposit against that, but they wanted to see, a healthy cash balance in the bank already. I mean, again, it was just, they just peeled apart every single thing. So the scope of work, the existing structure, every line item on the contractor's, estimate. And it was frustrating for the contractor because most contractors work on a cost plus basis, which makes him dynamic and adaptable and able to work faster. But for when there's an SBA involved, they're at the bank, even though the bank is in Utah, they have a local inspector that has to come. And so every time the contractor sends an invoice to the bank to be paid by the bank holding the SBA loan, before that happens, the inspector has to come from Raleigh and take pictures and talk to the contractor and make sure that what the invoice says was done was actually done. So that job went really quickly and the contractors worked really fast, but they were hampered slightly in getting paid by the SBA thing, and so that was a little frustrating for them.
Okay. Um, the second thing you mentioned earlier, we talked about capitalization, then you talked about just what hospitality is. And I feel like hospitality is making people feel welcomed, nourished, loved, appreciated, valued. Um, it can be accomplished in almost any business. Food doesn't have to be involved, but food is such a core part of what, you know, hospitality is. To me, it's almost like inviting somebody into your home. And um, if you're the owner of the home, you want them to feel, you want them to have a great time. You're going to go above and beyond to make sure everything about that experience is great because they're your friends or your family or whatever. And as an owner of a restaurant, that's your mentality. But the challenging thing about the restaurant is you have to get a staff of people that, this isn't their baby. This is their livelihood, but this is your baby. You have to get people that want to create that kind of experience, you know, for everybody that walks in the door. And I remember there was a guy out in Gilbert, Arizona one time, Joe Johnston, and he said something to me that's always stuck. He said he was talking about his coffee shop, and he's like, I, you know, if somebody can make, if somebody is like a true artist and can craft an amazing coffee beverage, and they're the best in the world at that skill, that's fine. But if they don't serve with a servant's heart, and if they care more about the coffee than about the people that are coming in and drinking the coffee, I'm not hiring them. And that really stuck with me, that serving with the servant's heart and caring. And you kind of mentioned this, the food is like 49% or whatever, less than 50. You got to get that right. But if you're not doing it with that warmth and genuine desire to make somebody feel welcome and appreciated and loved, it doesn't really work, does it?
No, and that's a great example because there's a coffee shop in Chapel Hill that I won't go to because they're so freaking unfriendly there.
Yeah.
Coffee's amazing, but I just get scowled at when I go. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, but that's everybody wants to feel appreciated. And there's no better way than to make somebody feel appreciated than to also fill their belly and give them a place to come and whether it's to celebrate. I mean, we went out last night with, my family and I went to celebrate my daughter's birthday and we had a great experience. I mean, yes, the food was good. but it was just the way we were, just everything about it was great. We were treated with respect. We were treated with, the server was intentional and present and not distracted. And, that's what just makes it where you just feel like, okay, everything's taken care of and we can just be present with ourselves. Um,
Well, there's a speech that I give to the staff, a story that I tell them pretty much every year. Most of them, I think I gave the abridged version this year on Valentine's Day because most of them had heard it before. But every New Year's Eve, every Valentine's Day, the tendency among the crew, especially the bar and dining room staff, is to call it amateur night, right? And so they say, people don't go out that often. They only go out once a year. Maybe they go for their birthday or their anniversary. They go out on New Year's Eve. They go out on Valentine's Day. And so the industry folks usually call it amateur night. Well, when I worked at the French Laundry, my folks and my brother and sister-in-law came out to visit. And so we all, five of us, had dinner at the French Laundry. This is back in 2000, right? 25 years ago. And so I knew from having worked there long enough that a table of five was a pain in the ass for the kitchen because, tasting menus, we do stuff two by two. And if we're going to do any variation to it, it's easy to do two by two. My sister-in-law was a vegetarian, and I worked garde at the French Laundry for that first year, and that station bore the brunt. That station, for some reason, had to do the entire vegetarian tasting menu. So I knew that the kitchen was going to have to coordinate two of these, two of those, plus one veg. So I just went into it with a fearful mentality, and and just I just had a negative attitude going into the whole thing. And my parents are not, uncouth or uncultured by any stroke, but certainly not wealthy, and eating at the French Laundry was an extravagance for them. And so Bobby Stuckey, famous American sommelier, master sommelier, and owner of Frasca in Boulder, Colorado, was the sommelier at the time. And so he comes to the table and asked us if we'd be having wine, and my dad ordered the Chalk Hill Chardonnay, which at the time was the cheapest bottle of wine on the list. And Bobby looked at him and closed the wine menu and said, "Excellent choice, sir." And so my message to the
mm,
staff, is you're going to have guests in here who may not know what fromage blanc is, who may pronounce the French on the menu wrong, who may ask for ice cubes with their glass of Zinfandel or something like that. But your job is to make them feel smart. And that's what Bobby did with my dad that day. And then because that that is so often missed. That is so often missed in restaurants. Make your guests feel welcome, make them feel smart, make him look good in front of her, make her look good in front of him. All those things that are just tiny tweaks that the server or bartender has or manager has to do. But they make all the difference to the guest. So that's my speech every time that a quote unquote amateur night rolls around is your job tonight is to make these guests feel smart.
oh, I love that. I love that so much. Um, that's what a great story. What a excellent choice, sir. I love that. Yeah, it's an art. It's hard. It's particularly challenging, I would think, in a situation like that on Valentine's when it's slammed and you got a lot going on and it's busy and you're trying to turn tables and but to just take a minute and be there and be intentional. And I'm big about, I think it's so important, Brandon, for people to be present and intentional in today's world because we're not. Rarely are
Mhm.
we because of these devices that we're on all the time and we're distracted and our attention spans are shorter than ever. And just taking that time to just be there and make eye contact and
Well, you're absolutely right. And one thing that I think, for all the negative that screens and everything are doing to our kids and to the next generation, and all the things that are changing, I think that kids are becoming much more street smart than they ever were. I think there are going to be fewer rubes out there, but I think they're going to be much better, if not judges of character, than judges of authenticity. And one thing that the restaurant industry has going for it is that we are an anchored business in the sense of going in and sit down to have a meal. That cannot be um, that cannot be done by AI or done by Uber Eats or something while you're in the restaurant. Like you have to have that face to face, look the guest in the eye and smile at them interaction. And so those guests who are, you know, better judges of reading faces and reading language and anything that they than any more than they ever were because they're exposed to so much of it all the time are going to value that true authenticity of a tableside experience. Again, like you said, of someone being present, of listening, being an active listener, and the four pillars of our four core values at Hawthorne and Wood are clarity, focus, precision, and grace. And all of those are meant, they apply to every single part of working in a restaurant. So the clarity of giving a guest good directions on the phone, of understanding what they are saying and what their particular need is and what table they want. The clarity of digitizing all of our recipes onto Google Sheets and making sure they're all scaled out in grams. The focus of active listening tableside, precision of making sure you take their order correctly. And if they want, two olives instead of three, then making sure that that goes on the ticket. And then just the grace of giving people grace, the grace of when someone, mispronounces Boeuf Bourguignon or, says, oh, I want that wine that I had last time I was here. Go ask the bartender. He'll remember and saying, yes, ma'am, no problem. So clarity, focus, precision, and grace to me, those cover all the things that you need to do to provide not only in the kitchen, but in the dining room, a great guest experience.
Love that, man. Love that. You mentioned earlier pride, and that can be a challenge for anybody in any business. But there's a lot of chefs that take a lot of pride in the food they create. But there's a book I read. It's sort of a Stoic philosophy book, but by a modern writer named Ryan Holiday called "Ego is the Enemy." And I mean, I've had in my younger days as a younger man, my share of ego, and you learn as you grow, mature a little bit, like you and I have, that that really is a truism that having an ego about something um, is going to present you more challenges than you might imagine.
Yeah, and another one of his books, "The Obstacle is the Way," is that's what's written on the piece of tape on the walk-in door here at Bluebird. I think that is such a great metaphor, and to be a line cook or a chef or a businessman or whatever that sees those obstacles as opportunities, that seeks out obstacles and seeks out problems, because those are the things that you have to solve. You have to get past those. That's the way forward. I love that metaphor. Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff.
He does have a lot. I have obstacle as a way. I have so many dog ears and underlines and
Yeah,
in that book.
yeah.
Well, it's an once you begin to think about your life and what's ahead of you that way, it's really liberating because you have some problem that comes along and it's yeah, I don't know if you have I ever talked to you about the Jocko Willink good video on YouTube. Do you know who Jocko is?
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, I give out his book. I give out extreme ownership to a lot of the managers too. Yeah.
Have you ever seen that clip on YouTube called Good?
Uh-uh.
Oh, dude, I'll send it to you. It's my favorite
Okay.
minutes on YouTube. And he's just talking about how it's the same philosophy as Obstacles Away, which is he talks about when he was a SEAL team commander, guys would come to him and they'd have some problem. And they'd be like, hey, boss, we got this big this or that or whatever the problem is. And his response, without fail, every single time was good. And the mentality is that you really, I mean, I watch that like I've been watching it from at least once a month, probably for years now, and I have my kids watch it, and it's like training your brain and training this muscle in your brain. It's a really valuable thing to do, I think, to have that discipline to work on that muscle so that every time there's a big problem, your response is good. Because now you're framing your mind into, okay, how are we going to turn this into an opportunity versus throw our hands up and say this is a big problem and freak out about it.
Mhm.
you just stay calm and say good. And then, because the fact of the matter is, if you can't look at things like that, life's going to be hard, business is going to be hard, and freaking having a restaurant's going to be really damn hard because there's lots of opportunities to say, ah, good, almost
Oh
daily in
man.
restaurants.
You gotta send that to me. I've gotta have that implanted in my brain because I still, even at this age, even if with all the freaking day-to-day issues, I still catastrophize, and it still kills me every time somebody calls out sick. It still kills me every time that a reach-in goes down. So I need to I'm need to live that obstacle is the way good mentality. Yeah, that's some I got some work to do on that for sure.
I'll send it to you. You'll save it, and you'll find yourself. I bet you'll end up showing it to your staff. It's like 3 minutes long, but it just boom,
Mhm.
like everything he does, it hits hard and it resonates. And I just kind of always, always go back to it. Um, well, okay. So let's talk about the industry standard. So you have a podcast. Just tell us about it. What's going on with it, and where do
Sure.
we find it, and what do you want people to know?
Yeah, so I talked about the origin of it and the conversation that I had with an old buddy of mine, and us just talking about the good old days and chefs and restaurants whose names are completely forgotten. That I can refer to Freddie Girardet to my crew, and they have no idea who I'm talking about. So that's certainly part of it. And then what has grown out of it is what I wanted to do. I was thinking about it when I woke up this morning. I was thinking about our conversation. I was like, when did I start writing? Well, I started writing back when I was in high school, and for a long time, I thought I was going to be a writer who just worked in restaurants. And obviously the balance changed on that quite a bit. And now I'm for years I was a cook who and a restaurant worker who occasionally wrote things in his spare time, and nothing worth going back to or anybody else reading, just something to kind of clear the chamber. So, but that's what I have always found myself doing now. If I have a vacation or a block of time, I'll have a pen and paper and a notebook or something next to me, and I'll be writing down, whatever it is. And lately, it has been more um, leadership development and behavioral organization and things like that is specifically geared to the kitchen. So the industry standard is giving me a great opportunity to do that on Substack. So 90% of what I write on Substack is free, and then there's 10%. There's a monthly subscription that people can buy, and I decided to the monthly subscription is $6.86 because that's how much
All
I
right.
was paid per hour when I worked at the French Laundry. That number is always stuck in my head. And then on Spotify, some of it is a story or a lesson. Some of it is talking about certain cookbooks. I think my favorite ones are going to be the interviews that I do, and I've listened to um, you know, if, well, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask these guys, and most of them so far I've known pretty well. And so there are certain things, like you were asking me some extremely granular nuts and bolts questions about restaurant finance, and so I have extremely granular questions of the same type for them. I talked to Brad Checky the other day, who's he was the chef de cuisine when I was executive chef out at Soul Bar in Napa. Now he has three restaurants in Sacramento. Plus, he's on a bunch of civic boards that are about promoting culinary and promoting farming in the community. And so, when was the first time that you talked to a chef or restaurant owner who was willing to talk about what they do for paid PR and marketing? Like that's just something that is completely opaque to line cooks and sous chefs and executive chefs who are salaried employees. So that is something that it's another thing that I want to pull back the curtain on because what makes sense, and I think every restaurant group has a different idea of the way that they approach whether it's social media, whether it's paid advertising, whether it's marketing, and what's the difference between those three. So that's what's going to be in the interviews. It's not just going to be, hey, remember that time when blah 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 blah. That was awesome. Like that's not what we're talking about in these interviews. They're more like my conversation with you, where we're really talking about something I think worthwhile.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like the kind of stuff you would talk about just if you weren't recording and you were just talking and you were catching up and how do you do this and how do you do that? And
Hmm.
let's talk more
Yeah.
about, and then you got it recorded. I mean that look, these kinds of I'm so glad you're doing it because the more open and transparent content and information that's out there, the more people are not intimidated by it. And the more, and you're either, maybe you're intimidated by it, like you said, like you feel like I don't want to ask these questions, I don't want to look stupid, or it's you don't know to ask this stuff and you get in over your
Hmm.
head, because you didn't know,
Yeah.
gosh, I should have had 6 months of working capital and I only had one, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. So it's great to have this type of really honest content out there because we need, it's rising tide lifts all boats in the restaurant industry. It's as hard as ever, and we need good people to be in this space and to not feel intimidated and to feel like they have the education they need and the mentors they need and the resources they need, because we need great restaurants to have great communities. That's yeah.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I've written that down in I'm not sure I've published it anywhere. I've written that down in three or four different places in the last few weeks. It's like, when was the last time you went to a town that said, "Oh man, it's a great place to live, but we really need more lawyers"? No, it's like, this is a great place to live, but we need more restaurants. We need more good
Yep.
chefs. What local in what town says we don't need any more good restaurants? Like, that's not a thing. Like, we need more good restaurants. We need more good chefs. I know that's true in Chapel Hill. I wish we had more
Yep.
good restaurants.
Same here in Waxhaw, man. Same here in Waxhaw. I completely agree. And it's that's and if you say, when you talk about like great cities and great towns and you start breaking down like, well, why is it great? Like, why is Charleston great? Or why is this place great? Or whatever.
Right.
You're never going to get past like one or two or three reasons before it's like, well, they've got all these awesome, like cool restaurants. Like, I
Always
mean,
on the podium. Always.
always it.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Well, dude, I'm so thrilled to have a chance to catch up with you again. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the conversation. Tell everybody, where do they find the industry standard? Where do you want people to find you?
Thanks, Will. Yeah, so there is a website, the-industrystandard.com, and there you can find links to Spotify, Substack, everything else. You can also go straight to Spotify and just type in the industry standard. You'll find our podcast. And then Substack is probably where the most material and the meatiest material is, because the podcasts and the articles are on there. And that's just the industry standard. Substack, you can do it on a web browser, you can do it on an app.
686. I noticed that I was going to ask you what I was wondering if it was like the term 86 or whatever. So 686. That was what you were earning per hour back in the day. Well, things have changed out in
Yeah.
California. The labor laws have changed, so they're earning a little bit more than that now.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Well, good. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate y'all as a customer. Appreciate your team. Please tell everybody I said hello, and thank you, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Will. Will do. I really appreciate it. Had a good time talking to you.
All right, man. We'll see ya.
All right, take care.